From the experience of the greatest exorcist in the world to an Irish knight who saw everything. Now it's unclear whether or not Bill saw the devil specifically, but he came pretty damn close. Bill is the writer of a book called 23 Minutes in Hell, which, as you guys can imagine, is his story of how he spent 23 minutes in hell. Wikipedia says Wise states that he had been a Christian since 1970 but had never studied hell before his experiences on the night of November 22nd, 1998. According to the book, Wise, then a real estate broker, found himself in a cell approximately 15 feet high and 10 feet by 15 feet in area where there were two foul-smelling beasts, personifications of evil and terror, who spoke in a blasphemous language. Wise says that the creatures had strength approximately 1,000 times greater than a man's strength. Wise states that he had heard the screams of the billions of damned people in hell. He states that he encountered Jesus, who told him to tell other people that hell is real. Wise states that his first experience ended with him lying on the floor of his living room screaming in horror. Pretty frightening experience, and one that's changed Bill's life forever. Number 4 on this list is Marcus Stenic. Marcus Stenic claims that he saw the devil for real when he was only 10 years old. Back in 1982, Marcus was only 10 and he lived out in a farm in Missouri. His quiet little farm lifestyle was pretty much anything a kid could want. Even though his family had him put in a lot of work to keep things going, he had acres upon acres to run and play and do everything that a growing kid should love to do. One afternoon, he was doing just that. A few kilometers from the main farm was a forest. He would often go here when he had a long time to play. In that forest was a stream that cut through, and by the stream, Marcus had built himself a little fort. Something that he had been working on all that summer. When he got there that day though, it wasn't how he left it. He arrived to his fort in a chipper spirit but quickly realized something wasn't quite right. His fort was ravaged, completely destroyed. It looked like something big had come through here and purposely wrecked it. And weirdest of all, there was this black liquid, almost sludge-looking substance that was on the remnants of his fort. He began to investigate, but suddenly everything went extremely cold. The air grew thick and there was a massive presence that appeared. Roughly 10 feet in front of Marcus was a dark, shadowy creature with black robes on, levitating above the ground. Bright red eyes pointed out of its shadowy face. The second he made eye contact with the being, he was no longer in control of his actions. His body wasn't his anymore. He fought for a while and tried to resist, but his body couldn't hold up and he blacked out. He woke up to a flashlight in his face and his mother's frantic voice calling out to him. It was hours later and he had been laying in the forest completely out cold since the encounter. He told his family about it, but they didn't quite believe him. They thought it must have just been a big animal that had frightened him. Marcus always knew though. That day he had seen the devil in person, and for some reason, it had let him live. Number 3 on this list is The Vision of Tundale. The Vision of Tundale is actually a book that details the account of an Irish knight. This knight took a trip to hell for 2 days, and I can promise you aren't going to find his itinerary on TripAdvisor anytime soon. In his trip to hell, he discovered that the devil is clearly very hungry. The devil has it all laid out so that people are cooked into a stew. They're done so in many different ways, but the biggest method for cooking these humans is by throwing them into giant frying pans with hundreds of other humans and cooking them until they're burned to death. Think that's bad though? Well, it gets a lot worse, guys. There are demons that are constantly running around hell with the specific mission of harming and causing pain to the human souls. Killing them by cutting them into pieces and then using their powers to bring them back to life just so they can cut them into pieces again. It's brutal, and it's what this place is doing all the time. Then there's the actual devil himself, or what this Irish knight thinks could have been the devil. Acheron is this giant monster that eats thousands of humans at a time. He's so big that these humans just fall into the deep pit that's his stomach and then get eaten by other beasts that are down there. Vipers and creatures that live inside this devil's stomach and wait to feast on these humans. If Acheron truly is the devil, then I highly recommend enjoying your time on Earth, because what comes next doesn't sound like the best time, folks. Number 2 on this list is Anne Catherine Emmerich. Anne Catherine Emmerich was born in 1774 and died in 1824, and she had quite a rough life while she was alive. During her time on Earth, she was constantly riddled with visions of hell. She saw so much of what is to come to those that sin that it felt as if she was living in hell while she was on Earth. Apparently, hell is similar to what we've conventionally drawn up, but it isn't exactly how we've pictured it. According to Anne, hell is a city. Not a pristine and beautiful one, of course, a burned down, disgusting city. Like a city that's just been through a horrible battle and all that stands are the ruins of it. Running through that city are also some swamps. These swamps are home to horrible creatures that are always hungry, and you and your soul, they're on the menu. The most notable creatures to live here are snakes. They will slither out of their swamps and attack those who are in the city, so you always have to be careful. People are always screaming and fire is always burning, but the loudest and most uncomfortable scream comes from the devil himself. Anne saw the devil and he was chained up in the middle of the city. Yeah, that's right guys, apparently the devil himself is locked down here and screaming all the time to be set free. Which at this point, he might actually be. Anne said that she found evidence in her visions that the devil would be released upon the world of the living before the year 2000. Hate to break it to you guys, but it's currently 2022, so if Anne was telling the truth, then it's very possible the devil is already out and about. And finally, number 1 on this list is Father Gabriel Amorth. Father Gabriel Amorth, an expert when it comes to exorcisms, somebody with the capability of purging a demon over video chat, has come face to face with the devil. Being in the exorcism business means that you're going to be dealing with demons and devilish creatures pretty regularly. On one specific occasion, one that Father Gabriel Amorth will never be able to forget, he believes he saw the actual devil. The New York Post writes, in 1997, when a young, slim peasant man was escorted into the small room where Father Gabriel Amorth conducted his exorcisms in Rome, the priest felt immediately confronted by evil. Amorth said he asked for the help of Jesus, and the young man began to curse and spit using English instead of his native Italian. Amorth bellowed, "Whoever you are and all your companions who possess this servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day and the hour of your damnation." The man fixed him with a glare and snarled, "I am Lucifer." It was obviously at this point where Father Gabriel Amorth knew he was dealing with something pretty serious. The Post goes on to describe how, in return, the demon resumed his shrieks, making the possessed turn his head back and his eyes roll. He remained like this with his back arched for a quarter of an hour. As this continued, the room became extremely cold and ice crystals formed on the windows and the walls. As Amorth continually commanded the demon to leave the host, the young man's body stiffened so much that he became hard and began to levitate. For several minutes, he remained hovering 3 feet in the air. Finally, the man dropped into a chair. Amorth said he left for the day but continued to regularly visit the man and pray over him until he was met with no resistance. Amorth died back in 2016, but during his life he had performed tens of thousands of exorcisms. This is a man who has seen it all when it comes to demons and anything from hell. The fact that this one exorcism sticks out to him as being the moment he knew he'd seen the devil makes me believe it to be true. That overwhelming sense of evil that the room was filled with, I can't imagine how that must have felt. Part of me wants to know just so I can experience it as well, but as the father would go on to describe, moments like this when you come face to face with evil as dark as that, it changes you as a person forever. It happened to him, and I imagine if you or I saw the devil in person, it would happen to us as well.
Number 5, Nicolo Paganini. The first up on our list today of people who summoned the devil or a demon of some kind is Nicolo Paganini, who was once called the devil's violinist, which is quite the nickname. Looks great on a resume. I didn't know the devil really hired out help like that. Paganini, which does sound a bit like a delicious sandwich, was born in 1782 in Genoa, Italy. Under his father's influence, he was given lessons by renowned violinist, quickly becoming a prodigy. His musical talents were praised, and he was given all manner of scholarships. He had his first performance at 11, and by age 15 he was already touring around Italy performing, just in case you needed something to compare yourself to and feel bad about your own achievements. Don't feel bad. I'm 26, I haven't toured Italy once. He was particularly well known for being able to perform recitals without sheet music. He memorized everything and was apparently able to play 12 notes a second at an inhuman speed. Now, while this could be explained by the fact that he'd been raised to play the violin in a Spartan-like upbringing, locals around Genoa began to whisper and tell stories of how he must have sold his soul to be able to play the violin like that. It also didn't help much that Nicolo's pale, lanky, and quite ghost-like appearance made people a bit suspicious of the guy. I get it, as someone who's very tall, lanky, and ghost-like, people ask me all the time, Taylor, did you sell your soul to be so good at YouTube hosting? The answer? Yes. Paganini was a striking man with hollow cheeks, pale skin, and very long, thin fingers, which did not calm any of these rumors down. These things plagued his reputation, with people claiming outlandish things, saying they'd seen him with hooves, they'd seen him talking to the devil. Some say his violin was made out of the intestines of a woman he'd slain, and her soul was trapped in his violin, which I guess would make it sound beautiful? Now, in the end, Paganini would contract tuberculosis, and found himself getting weaker and weaker as the months and years went by. Before his death, he turned away last rites from a Catholic priest, saying he didn't need him because he wasn't going to die. He would pass shortly after. Was it because he'd already made his last rites with Satan, or was he just confident? It's up to you to decide. And if you're looking for more freaky stories of demonic possession, exorcisms, and all that jazz, we've got loads of that on the channel. If ghosts and goblins ain't your jam, we've got cryptids, conspiracies, aliens, government cover-ups, basically anything scary above or under the sun, we've covered it more than a few times. So click on through, hit that bell to not miss a single scream, but please, do that at the end of this video, okay? We got way more scary stories coming up for you. Number 4, Latoya Amons. Our next entry on this list is Latoya Amons and her mother Rosa Campbell, involving an infamous haunting that is sometimes referred to as the 200 Demon House or the Demon House. That's a lot of demons. A family moved into a new house in Gary, Indiana, only to quickly discover that the house already had plenty of residents. They claimed that black flies would swarm the porch every single day in December in a climate that should reasonably have had them die off. Mother Rosa Campbell claims she heard footsteps in the basement and doors creaking, and witnessed a shadowy specter of a man pacing around her living room, claiming he was leaving behind boot prints. Now that's pretty scary. But the most wild claim was that this spirit man once choked her directly. Rosa's daughter Latoya claimed that she levitated above her daughter while unconscious during a sleepover, leading to her friend praying for her safety until she returned to the ground. Another wild incident describes an unknown force pushing the son of the family firmly into a wall, with a voice in the back of his head screaming, "It's time to die." Strangely, the family didn't decide to, burn the house down and move out and change state lines, but instead reached out to their family physician. You know the old saying, when there's something strange, who are you gonna call? Your local general practitioner. Well, the doc visited the house and noted that he thought the behavior of the family was delusional. So the family went to Father Michael Maganote in 2012, who was called in to perform an exorcism. He believed the family had unintentionally summoned a demon and were being tormented by hundreds of demons. And the real estate agent didn't mention that, did he? In the end, the father exorcised the house, and the Amons family moved to Indianapolis in peace, where they now await a movie deal from 20th Century Fox, I'm certain. Number 3, Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson could play the blues real well. In fact, he played it so darn well that people suspected he wasn't just really in tune with the music, but had made a deal with the devil to pluck the strings. Johnson was born in Mississippi in May 1911 and lived alongside his 9 siblings. Good gosh, imagine the rush for the bathroom in the mornings. He eventually made his way to Memphis, where he discovered his love for the blues, and boy howdy could he play them. By all accounts, he was a legendary harmonica player, but initially his friends would describe him as a pretty lousy guitarist. Well, practice makes perfect, right? Well, practice and demonic transaction. Because the story goes that Johnson would disappear for a few weeks entirely and buried his guitar at the crossroads of the now famous Highways 49 and 61 in Clarksdale, Mississippi, where the devil retuned his instrument and blessed his hands with the unnatural skills that made him a legend. When he started playing again, he was an overnight master of the blues. Now, unfortunately, the blues is born out of tragedy, and Robert Johnson was sadly no different. He passed away at the fairly early age of 27, the infamous age in which rock stars and famous musicians are purported to die with an alarming regularity. Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain, to rattle off a few. What makes this particular death odd, though, is how few details exist. His death was never reported, no autopsy ever performed, no cause ever given. The only thing we have to go on is local folklore. One in particular tells the story of Johnson playing at a country dance, where Johnson had been flirting with a married woman, and she gave Johnson a bottle of whiskey, which was slapped out of his hands by Sonny Boy Williamson, another musician at the exact same show. And he told him not to drink anything that he hadn't personally seen the lid come off of, which is fairly good advice. And Johnson responded by saying, "Don't ever knock a drink out of my hand." Johnson would die in a convulsive state 3 days later, with some believing that he'd been poisoned by the woman and her husband as revenge. Or perhaps it was just the devil coming back for the merchandise that he'd paid for, his soul. Number 2. Agrippa. Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa was a scholar living in the 15th century with one of the coolest names ever. Corny Agrippa. Agrippa devoted his life to writing about the occult. Now, I can freely talk to you about the occult, the devil, and all manner of blasphemous heretical things, but things haven't always been so liberal. And way back when, even so much of breathing about the devil was tantamount to sinning, so Agrippa was not a man without controversy. He wrote of the devil in great, intricate detail. His books would include information breaking down exactly how witches cast spells and perform incantations and rituals, and even shared where they get all of their cool outfits, big hats, and big stomping boots. It's mostly Hot Topic and doll skill. So where did Agrippa get all of this information? Was he just making it up? Was he really in tune with the local scene? Kind of. He claimed that when he was a young man, he gave in to the temptation of Satan and ran with a convent of witches, going around engaging in rituals and casting spells, and I gotta be honest, that sounds awesome. I did a similar thing when I followed Grimes on tour. Eventually, Agrippa is said to have cleaned up a little, got over his goth phase, and said to have found Jesus and saved his soul, and began to write books preaching the good word about how you should let Jesus in your life and push the devil on out of here. Surprisingly, Agrippa was never executed despite his open nature regarding his witchcraft and occult days. It's a common misconception that he was executed for his heresy, but actually in the end, Agrippa pushed people to be more understanding of demons and the devil, and pushed for people to know their enemy. He wanted to save people from the devil's grasp and save them through prayer rather than just burning them all at the stake, which is a noble goal. And number 1. Anna Eckland. Perhaps you've heard the story of Anna Eckland before. We've covered it on the channel, I think, and it was made into a popular movie, appropriately enough titled The Exorcism of Anna Eckland, so you don't confuse it with any other exorcism movies out there. Now, Anna's story is infamous. She's a young woman from America who has the dubious award of having the world's longest exorcism, spanning decades of exorcising. Those demons were in there good. Those are demons with like rent control. You are not getting them out of that apartment. It will begin in 1912 when Eckland underwent an exorcism by Father Theophilus Reisinger, a Bavarian priest. It seemed like things were successful and Anna was freed, but then in 1928, Anna began exhibiting all the telltale signs of demonic possession yet again, and Reisinger returned to perform a second exorcism on Eckland. Eckland was taken into a convent on August 1928 to be dealt with round the clock. She would behave oddly, to say the least, hissing at them like a cat, flying into fits of violent rage when offered food that had been doused in holy water. This exorcism was brutal even by exorcism standards, with Eckland allegedly levitating, howling, hanging out the door frame. Eckland was believed to be possessed by not just any old rank and file demon, but allegedly was possessed by Judas Iscariot, big celebrity demon inside, alongside the ghost of her own father. Alongside the ghost of her own father, who had an affair with her aunt and had made unwanted advances to Anna in life. After months of exercising, and not the good kind, Anna's body deteriorated. She would vomit up debris, her head and face swelled, she refused to consume food or drink. Eventually, after months and years of exorcism, on December 23rd, the final day of the exorcism, the battle was won and Anna was freed, and by all accounts went on to live a fairly normal life afterwards. A Christmas miracle if there ever was one.
Number 5 on this list is Jennifer Perez. Jennifer is currently on, I think, what a lot of people would describe as a good path, but it wasn't always that way. For a while there, Jen was going down a really bad path. Drugs and alcohol and depression, they ran her life, and things, they weren't looking too bright for Jennifer. In fact, it got so bad that one evening in the early 2000s, her body couldn't hold up anymore. And she died. It was in that time of death that she visited hell and saw the actual devil. Now, it didn't start out like that. Apparently her heart stopped and the first place she went was heaven. However, she wasn't allowed into heaven. The way she ran her life and the neglect that she had shown to her relationships was not going to grant her passageway. So they sent her down to hell. It was a horrible place, she said. As she fell from heaven's gates, it got hotter and hotter and hotter. The heat was unbearable and the air was filled with an intense smell of sulfur. Then she saw the people. Thousands upon thousands of them getting brutally tortured by all kinds of demons in all kinds of horrific fashions. And at the heart of it all, a massive red creature who she assumed must have been the devil. Eyes glaring, watching over all of it, almost like the way Sauron watches over things in The Lord of the Rings. Before she hit the hot hellish ground though, she woke up. She was revived, and her life was saved. From that point on, she has completely changed her way of life and tried to do everything in her power to never end up in that horrible place again with the devil watching over all of it. I imagine that if I ever saw the devil up close and personal like that, I might change my way of living as well. Number 4 on this list is Sim Calpin. Sim Calpin is a Reddit user who believes that several years ago they saw a demon, or maybe even the devil, in their own home. They write, "When I was about 17, I woke up in the middle of the night thirsty and I went into the kitchen to get some water. When I walked into the kitchen and flipped on the light, I saw what I can only describe as a large golem-looking creature. It looked me in the face and then screeched, a noise I will never forget, and then crawled on the walls into the unlit part of the house. Well, I wasn't sleeping or dreaming. I ran into my room and turned on music and did not sleep the rest of the night. I've only told a handful of people about it, and yes, I'm completely serious." I've never heard of the devil as being a golem creature, but it's certainly not impossible. What the devil would have been doing in your home, clutching your ceiling in the middle of the night, now, that's a better question. Personally, this probably rings closer to a demon than the actual devil himself. No disrespect to Sim Calpin here, but unless there is something particularly special about him, his family, or his home, then I don't really see why the devil would have been there. But then again, why is the devil doing anything that he's doing? Why would a demon have been there? There are a lot of questions involved in this story, and obviously Sim wasn't in a position to be able to ask when he ran into this thing at the time. At least it stayed in the kitchen and didn't follow him upstairs. Number 3 on this list is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was a very real dude, and he definitely lived one heck of a life. Now, he may not have actually seen the devil necessarily, but he definitely saw hell and all of its horrible details. There's a text called the Apocalypse of Peter that is written by the disciple Peter and describes the divine visions that Christ had of hell. Wikipedia says, the work details both heavenly bliss for the saved and infernal punishments for the damned. In particular, the punishments are graphically described in a physical sense and generally correspond to lex talones. Blasphemers are hung by their tongues, liars who bear false witness have their tongues set on fire eternally, callous rich people are made to wear rags and be pierced by sharp stones as would beggars, and so on. Yeah, so even though Jesus didn't necessarily see the devil, he saw what the devil was up to, and none of it's pretty good. I don't know about you folks, but I like my tongue the temperature that it's currently at, and having it lit on fire for eternity doesn't really sound like the best way to spend my time. It's no wonder Jesus preached so much about love and God and everything. My dude literally saw what was gonna happen to all of us if we didn't do any of that. Jesus straight up knew that the devil was just waiting for the moment your soul passed over to hang you by your tongue and torture you forever. Number 2 on this list is Patrick Antle. Patrick had a horrifying encounter with a demon several years back when he was 17. He's 23 now, but it's taken him that long to even speak about the event that transpired. At the time, he lived with his parents in Cincinnati. One evening, Patrick decided to sneak out and go to a local high school party. The sneaking out process worked out fine and he made it to the party safely. It was on his way back though that he had the scariest moment of his life. He was walking back the way he came to go back home a little bit past 2 a.m. The area that he was in was rural and there weren't too many houses that he passed by. However, when he turned down the second last street before his own, he saw a house on the side of the road. It's a house. This shouldn't be anything serious, but what struck him as being weird was that he'd never seen that house before. Now, Patrick had been drinking a little bit that evening, so he just chalked it up to being a little bit drunk and kept walking down the street. When he was passing right in front of this house though, he stopped and glanced at it and noticed the garage door was open. Only a few seconds had passed when out of the darkness of the garage door, 2 red glowing eyes appeared in the night. His body immediately froze, and even though his mind was telling him to run, his limbs didn't want to cooperate. Standing stuck in the middle of the road, paralyzed, Patrick got struck with an overwhelming fear that his life might end right there, right then. The eyes dug into his skull and felt as if they were infiltrating his soul. Then he heard a voice. A voice that wasn't coming from the garage, but one that was actually coming right out of his own head. The voice was a deep, guttural snarl that said, "Turn away now or your body will burn in the deep fires of hell and your soul will be tormented for eternity." The message ended and his body hit the ground. He didn't take any time to think about what had happened, but just got up, ran home as fast as he could. It took him several weeks to work up the courage, but eventually he went back to that road and saw that the house that he had seen that evening wasn't there anymore. To this day, he has no idea what happened to him or who that was, but he believes that there is a really strong possibility that he encountered the devil and for some reason, it decided to let him live. And finally, number 1 on this list is Sister Josefa Menendez. Born in 1890 and only living 33 years, Sister Josefa Menendez saw her fair share of hell. She was constantly bombarded with visions of hell and the devil himself. So much so that she wrote about this in a book called The Way of Divine Love. The purpose of the book was to lead people away from hell and the devil, but writing it must have been difficult because she would have ran into Satan himself way too many times. Eternally burning fire and dark, never-ending corridors. That's what she saw hell to be filled with. All the souls and people who were sent there, the devil would suck the capability of love and compassion from them so that they could no longer feel any positive emotions at all. It was just depression and grief for those that got sent here. The devil was a dark creature in her visions who would eat these happy emotions up but not feel any of them himself. She saw these visions and warned us about them so that we wouldn't have to see them. I recommend heeding her warning.
Coming in at number 5, Michael Taylor. It's 1974, Yorkshire, England. Michael Taylor, age 31, father of 5 and husband to Christine Taylor. Michael was a well-mannered and caring father and husband. Michael, like anyone, became depressed from a back injury, left him short on work and seeming a little odd and off. After seeking religious advice and a one-on-one session at a local church, Michael started having outbursts and acting aggressively. Puzzled, he sought one-on-one sessions which turned ugly. After apparently changing form and attacking Marie, a young religious leader helping Taylor and unable to remember anything, Michael and the church agreed that an exorcism was necessary. Father Peter Vincent and Reverend Raymond Smith met at St. Thomas and started. It got so violent, he was tied to the church floor. After hours in the middle of the night, the two had managed to exorcise more than 40 demons out of Michael, in which appeared around them as they exited. Violence continued, leaving only 3 demons remaining for the next day. After returning home from the first session, Michael was found now only hours later, naked, in the middle of the street, covered head to toe in blood. Michael had returned home, to which then his wife and family dog lay dead as the police arrived in the AM. His wife, missing her eyes, tongue, and skin from the front of her skull. The dog, torn limb from limb and spread around the home. He was arrested soon after for the death of his wife. Michael had this to say about his late wife in court, quote, "I am released. I am released. It is done. The evil in her has been destroyed." Yeah, that was definitely a vessel for him. He was acquitted on psychological conditions and jury found that he met his breaking point during the exorcism that night. He was acquitted on insanity and remained in and out of facilities until he passed in 2013. Number 4, David Berkowitz. New York, 1976, and the police were busy on the search for a man shooting couples in the New York area, which had started to become a citywide phenomenon that summer. Brunette women with long hair frantically cut and dyed their hair blonde in fear. The .44 caliber killer was the title the press gave David in his earliest of assaults. After losing his job, David began to experience psychotic episodes and claimed that his neighbor's German shepherd had begun talking to him and eventually explained to David that he was a demon. He took the name after the pet's owner, Sam. It was this dog who ordered the killings by David and claims that the pet coaxed David into killing. David used this summer to shoot 8 people, resulting in 6 lives and the stabbings of 2 others. Using his .44 caliber bulldog revolver, David sent police on a wild goose chase around New York City with handwritten letters, David mocking the detectives with cryptic messages. Some of them explain who Sam is, and some of them explain what Sam does. Some mock police, saying that they are never going to find or stop him. David was finally arrested just hours before his next planned victim's visit. He applauded police in their ability to stop him, in the back seat of the car, laughing and cheering. Although David pleaded not guilty to insanity and pleaded guilty, expressing that he was coaxed by the demon and that it demanded him to kill for hell, he was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences with parole after 25 years. During the mid-90s, he amended his confession and claimed that he had been a member of a violent satanic cult that orchestrated the incidents as ritual murder and pleaded guilty to stabbing and attempting to murder others before the shootings had even begun. His letters are public and spine-chilling. Check them out. Real Riddler stuff. Quote, "I am the monster. I am Beelzebub. I am the chubby behemoth. Police, let me haunt you with this. I'll be back. I'll be back. Yours in murder, Mr. Monster." Okay, his violent spree led the legal system to create a new law called Son of Sam's Law, designed to create criminals from financially profiting from the publicity created by their crimes, which, at the time, he was basically a celebrity. He remains in prison to this day. Number 3, Herbert Mullen. 1970s again. At the exact same time, in the same area, police had 2 serial killers to keep up with, Herbert Mullen and Edmund Kemper. No relationship to each other or each other's cases. Mullen was a paranoid schizophrenic in and out of mental health facilities in California during his teens. Mullen then kills 14 people during a 4-month period due to, quote, the impending natural disaster that would happen if he didn't. Mullen was convinced that the voice in his head he was hearing was telepathic. Mullen claims the voice of the Father had explained that the Vietnam War acted as a giant sacrifice that saved us from an earthquake and another one was coming soon. Constantly hearing the man's voice named the Father, encouraging him to gain more blood sacrifices, Mullen bludgeoned a man to death with a baseball bat. Mullen claims that the man was actually Jonah from the Bible and was begging him to sacrifice himself to Mullen. He then murdered a woman in the front seat of his car before dismembering her in a nearby park. Yeah, this is real satanic stuff, I told you. His third victim, a priest that he was confessing to in a Catholic church. Mullen says the priest claims to have telepathically begged him to sacrifice his life for the cause. Mullen then killed 5 people in one day. He claims that all the victims telepathically begged to be sacrificed as a good deed to the Father. Herbert Mullen remains in custody, and who was the father who kept talking to him through all of these people? Number 2, Richard Ramirez. This next guy is really nasty and deserves to be in the second spot. 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 assaults, and 14 burglaries. Sounds like a hell of a guy. The Night Stalker. Charming name for what this man did. Born in Texas, his older brother went to Vietnam and returned with some pretty gruesome stories and some pretty gruesome visuals. The young Ramirez, soaking all of this up, grows up obsessed with the satanic occult and fascinated. He made various references to Satan during his legal proceedings. His trial began in 1989 and he was convicted of 13 murders and a variety of other crimes. Nearly 2 months later, he was sentenced to death, with the judge stating that his crimes showed, quote, cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. And the worst part was that he made most of his victims pray to Satan and swear on Satan that they were going to tell him the truth, whatever he asked. I'm not really going to get into the sick details of really what this man did, nor will I with the number 1 spot, but it involved hammers, machetes, ropes, knives, guns, you name it, anything violent. He was an absolute nasty creature that liked to torture his victims and really drive the satanic love for you-know-who. First responders would have taken pictures of numerous satanic symbols drawn on the walls in almost a ritualistic reenactment. He was captured by the use of the huge media surrounding his story on the way to take his next victim's life. His trial was truly a disgusting display of media attention, one of the most expensive court cases to date, losing only to O.J. Simpson. He screamed "Hail Satan" at his hearing and flashed self-harm pentagrams. He died of cancer in 2013. This guy must have signed some sort of book for you-know-who. Coming in at number 1, Charles Manson. Okay, so most of us are all familiar with this man and his famous case amongst American pop culture. Ramirez was said to have been a copycat of this man, and I can see why with all the satanicness. California in the late 1960s. A criminal, musician, and a victim of LSD studies, Charles Manson would go on to start and lead the Manson family cult. A small religious group with unclear motives but lost souls and a ton of drugs, and a father to now a family. In summer 1969, some of the cult members committed murders in LA. Apparently Manson had ordered his followers to kill the people who had lived at the address he had given them for their initiation. The murder of actress Sharon Tate and 4 others in her home on August 8th and 9th, including the La Biancas the next day, another 2 victims. 4 members of the family committed the murders under Manson's instructions and satanic offering. Manson apparently heard voices that there was going to be a race war brought on by religious disputes, and that these killings were an offering to... who exactly? The famous helter-skelter message, incoherent scribbles, blood all over the walls. They were then to hide underground in, quote, the bottomless pit under Death Valley, which Manson knew the location of, but instead were caught on the run days later. Manson was sentenced to life in prison under the pretense that he was the one who targeted, planned, and brainwashed his, quote, piggies into committing. While in prison, Charles was diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoid delusion disorders, seeing visions and hearing voices for more than half of his life. He died in prison in 2017. Yeah, I've seen what Tarantino did with his latest movie, and it's definitely a subtle PG-13 fiction version of what actually went down on that night. What do you guys think? Do you think Charles saw the devil? I think he actually was the devil.
Starting off this countdown, we have the North Berwick Witches. North Berwick is a small town in Scotland where some of the most brutal and horrific witch trials took place. It all started during the reign of King James VI. While on his way to get his new bride in 1589, he encountered a series of disastrous storms. In fact, the storms were so bad that he was forced to head back home. He immediately thought that the storms were the work of witches. It didn't help that back then a rumor had started that a witch had sailed out on the River Forth to conjure up some storms. So from then on, King James was dead set on finding these witches. In fact, 70 to 200 women were accused of being witches. Most of them were tortured and then executed. Now, apparently during these trials, he did come across a number of women that admitted to being witches. They claimed that they had all made deals with the devil and were now under his command. They also claimed that they would use one of the churches there to hold their covens. They even said that this was the place where they had summoned the devil himself. In fact, this church was located right on the seafront, so James was like, aha! The perfect place to conjure up storms, all of you are guilty. As a result, these witches were strangled and then burnt at the stake. In our 4th spot today, we have Sabrina Spellman. Although she's a fictional character, Sabrina still deserves a spot on today's list. Without too many spoilers, the show The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is about Sabrina, a teenage witch who on her 16th birthday has to sign her name in the Book of the Beast. Upon doing so, she makes a deal with Satan. She basically gives herself to him in exchange for magical powers. At first, Sabrina refused to do so because she didn't want to give up her mortal life, but later on she was forced into doing it in order to stop a number of evil forces that were murdering many of the townsfolk. Once she signed the book, she is forced to do Satan's bidding. She has to basically bow down to him and do whatever he instructs her to do. In return, Sabrina's magic became even stronger. In fact, she became the 4th witch in all of history to summon demonic blue hellfire, which was then used in order to fight off the Greendale 13. And for her to do that as a relatively new witch is very impressive. Later on in the show, we also realize that Miss Wardwell is evil and is using Sabrina so she can become the Queen of Hell. Sabrina's destiny took a dark shift as soon as she made a deal with the Dark Lord. Although all the witches in the series have signed this book, the Dark Lord specifically needed Sabrina to sign it. Her destiny is far more different than the other witches in the show. Have you guys watched the show? Let me know in the comments below. Honestly, I did, but after season 2, I couldn't anymore. Let me know your thoughts though. Moving on at number 3, we have Lilith. Now, the description of Lilith varies depending on your beliefs. In Jewish folklore, Lilith is a female demon. In Luciferian witchcraft and Luciferianism, Lilith is described as the consort of Samael. Other people believe that she is the wife of Satan, or that Lilith was the first wife of Adam. But she wasn't that obedient to him, and Adam didn't like that, so Lilith left. Then God made Eve, who was more obedient. Lilith became jealous and turned into the snake snake that made Eve take a bite from the apple. The two were banished from the Garden of Eden, and Lilith turned into a demon, her main goal to get revenge on all men. Then you have the people that believe Lilith is a child-killing witch. She wasn't able to conceive, so she was jealous of pregnant women and would go around killing them or stealing their babies. In this case, we are looking at the version in which Lilith is a witch, obviously. In this case, Lilith is working alongside Satan to do his dark bidding for him. Their deal is that if she's with him, then she will work for him. But she's not always obedient. In fact, she has gotten frisky with other men. In the TV series Supernatural, Lilith is depicted as a white-eyed, powerful demon. She is said to be the first human that made a deal with Satan and promised to serve him. As a result, she became the first demon. In the chilling adventures of Sabrina, we end up finding out that one of the characters, Miss Wardwell, is actually Lilith. She is referred to as Satan's concubine and the mother of demons, and of course, she's a witch. In fact, she is said to be the first witch in existence. She made a deal with Satan, or the Dark Lord. According to her story, she was wandering the wasteland aimlessly when she encountered Lucifer, the fallen angel. She made a deal to heal the wounds caused by the loss of his wings, if he in return helped her. She then pledged allegiance to him and became his handmaiden. In the end, Lilith wants to become his queen, which is why she goes to the extreme lengths to do whatever he tells her to do. Moving on to number 2, we have Sarah Good. Now, if you have seen the Fear Street trilogy on Netflix, then chances are you might be a little familiar with this story. The movie was loosely based off of the real witch, Sarah Good, but in the movie they changed her name to Sarah Fear. So Sarah was one of the first 3 women that were accused of witchcraft. It was her, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba. These 2 other ladies were said to be real witches, and when they were accused, they brought forth Sarah Good's name, saying that she was a witch too, little tattletalers. The townspeople were quick to believe this because Sarah never attended church. She lacked self-discipline and self-control, and she was 38, but apparently she looked like she was 70. That, combined with the other ladies' testimonies, had everyone against her. In fact, apparently when she was brought in front of the court, a number of witnesses began to twitch and rock back and forth and moan. So they were all like, damn, she's definitely a witch. Look at what she's doing to the people that accused her of being one. Not only that, but her own husband and daughter even admitted to Sarah being a witch as well. And then things kept getting worse and worse for her. At one point in her trial, one of the accusers started acting out and claimed that Sarah attacked her with a knife. In the end, of course, she was found guilty of witchcraft and was sentenced to death. But just before her death, she made a deal with the devil to curse a priest. She said, and I quote, "I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take my life, God will give you blood to drink." Now, when she died, apparently the priest and his land both became cursed, just like Sarah claimed it would. To this day, it's said that Sarah continues to haunt the town, searching for those that have wronged her. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Bonis Witches. In 1679 in Bonis, Scotland, a number of women were accused of being witches. These women were Annabelle Thompson, Margaret Pringle, Margaret Hamilton, Bessie Yicker, and another woman named Margaret Hamilton. Now, during this time, the hype and fear of witches was dying down. So people were shocked that out of nowhere 5 women were being accused. But rumor has it these women had renounced their baptisms and had been in contact with the devil on a number of occasions. They apparently had eaten, drank, danced, and had intercourse with the devil. Annabelle Thompson even admitted that she had made a deal with the devil for a better life. She had been widowed twice, and so she turned to the devil for help, and in return she would be loyal to him. She then invited the other women to come over and do all these things with the devil with her. The women then apparently formed a demonic pact with each other and Satan. One of the Margaret Hamiltons also admitted that she had met the devil. She claimed that the devil came to her in the form of a black dog, and she said that she was his servant for 3 decades already. And another was accused of using her witch magic to help get wealth. As a result, all the witches were found guilty and were strangled at the stake before being burned to ashes.
Number 5 on this list is the Devil's Town. The Devil's Town is a place in Serbia that's basically a collection of very interesting natural forming rocks, or at least we think it's natural forming. Mehana Mihajovic says the Devil's Town is one of the widely known places in Serbia. Situated between 2 ravines of the creepy names the Devil's Ravine and Hell's Ravine, there lies the spookiest natural monument. Over 200 randomly formed stone poles up to 20 meters in height. Almost all the poles carry the black cap from volcanic rock andesite, adding to the overall peculiar atmosphere around the place. Close to the locality, there are fresh mineral water wells and ruins of an old church. The mysticism of the Devil's Town natural natural monument keeps fueling the imagination of the local people. One of the widely known legends suggests that a long time ago, local people threw a wedding party for a brother and a sister that fell in love with little help from the devil's spells. God wanted to punish all the attendees and turned them into the stones where they still lay to this day. The other legend suggests that the devil's poles are actually local kids who refused to learn and decided to live an immoral life stripped of knowledge. It sure sounds like a great way to make your kids do their homework. So regardless of which legend you choose to believe in, this is evidence that the devil was once around here. As far as what sort of message this leaves behind, I guess you need to be the one to decide, right? Is this a way for the devil to just reinforce his legitimacy? Is this a way for the devil to instill fear in people? Is this a way for the devil to tell us that we should actually be fearing God? These are all interesting things to consider and think about when we're talking about the devil's town. I will say something and give the devil a little credit. If these rocks were actually formed by him in some devilish activity, then honestly, nice work, man. They're very cool and made a strong push to become part of the 7 natural wonders of the world. Maybe people decided to leave them out of that list though, because promoting something created by the devil himself might not be the best idea. Comment down below what you guys think this weird and creepy formation of rocks could truly mean. Number 4 on this list is Hotel California. Hotel California is right up there as being one of rock's best songs ever. I feel like I have a very special connection to the Eagles classic because I remember in 10th grade or sometime in high school, I had to do a project breaking down a classic song and looking at the lyrics and really evaluating them. I decided to do mine on Hotel California, and it was through this project that I learned something very interesting about this piece of music. Hotel California may have been partly written by the devil. Thoman says it's not only on Halloween that you can expect the devil to be up to no good in the background. For example, with the super hit Hotel California by the Eagles, when played in reverse, the secret message says, "Satan, he hears this. He had me believe incredible or verifiable." Was the ruler of hell involved making the Eagles' greatest hits album the best-selling album of the 20th century in the US? Now this is the message you get when you play it backwards, but you don't even need to play it backwards to get some pretty weird messages just listening to it in general. The whole song itself is a complete trip. One line in the song says, "This could be heaven or this could be hell." Another line says, "We are all just prisoners here of our own device." And finally the song finishes by saying, "You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave." The whole song itself could be one big metaphor for hell, let alone the secret message in the song that you hear when you listen to it in reverse. What do you guys think? Was this actually the work from the devil? Number 3 on this list is the Devas. The Devas actually come from the religion Zoroastrianism and are part of that religion's demonic entities. If you're unfamiliar with that religion, then just know that it is one of the oldest religions ever and is still being practiced today. Well, there are tons of messages in scripture and artwork describing these demons that basically act as warning messages to all who may have the misfortune of running into them. Grunge says, traditionally Devas are thought to be the creation of Ahriman, an antagonist and equally powerful counterpart to the benevolent creator. In one of their religious texts, the Gathas, Devas are described as rejected gods with an affinity for evil who, for whatever reason, still hold sway with some followers. One of their chief character traits is an inability to discern truth from lies, making them at least psychologically adjacent and possibly directly related to most roommates that you've likely met on Craigslist. All kidding aside though, these things can be very, very dangerous, and many people believe that a lot of the work and scripture that talks about them, that was actually left behind from the devil. The purpose of doing this was to strike fear into people and make them start to distrust their fellow human. Number 2 on this list is the Blood Falls. Once again, we have a naturally occurring wonder that people believe is actually a hidden message from the devil. Let me tell you the geological explanation of this, and then I'll tell you the possible demonic explanation. Atlas Obscura says, roughly 2 million years ago, the Taylor Glacier sealed beneath it a small body of water, which contained an ancient community of microbes. Trapped below a thick layer of ice, they have remained there ever since, isolated inside a natural time capsule. Evolving independently of the rest of the living world, these microbes exist in a place with no light or free oxygen and little heat, and are essentially the definition of primordial ooze. The trapped lake has very high salinity and is rich in iron, which is what gives the waterfall its red color. A fissure in the glacier allows the subglacial lake to flow out, forming the falls without contaminating the ecosystem within. So that's the geological explanation. The one involving the devil isn't as calm and cool though. This legend says that a man died and was sent to hell. Now he got there and obviously didn't love where he was. The man was continuously tortured and mistreated, as we can all expect from being in hell. Well, apparently this particular man wasn't about staying here forever. One day he attempted a daring escape and actually made it pretty far. He found a gateway between hell and the natural world. This gateway led directly to Antarctica, where the falls are now. He made it back to our physical world, but then the devil showed up. The devil brutally mutilated and cut the man to pieces, creating a waterfall of blood. The devil then sealed this blood in ice as a warning and message to everyone left on Earth never to attempt to go in or out of hell. Finally, number 1 on this list is the Codex Gigas. This book often makes all of our lists when we're talking about the most haunted or most cursed books ever, and rightfully so. This book, written many years ago, was literally by the hand of the devil. Mental Floss says the book's sinister reputation stems from a full-color portrait of the devil contained in its pages and a legend about how the image got there. According to folklore, the book is the work of a monk, possibly Hermanus Hermitis or Herman the Recluse, who had broken his vows and been sentenced to be walled up alive in the monastery. He struck a deal to save himself. If, over the course of a single night, he could write a book containing all the world's knowledge, his life would be spared. When he realized the task was impossible, the monk sold his soul to the devil, who helped him finish the book and signed it with the now infamous portrait. Now, I'd love to tell you guys what message the devil left for us in here, but that would require me to read the book myself, which I have absolutely no intention of ever doing. Legends have been told of people becoming insane and losing their minds and all sense of reality after reading it. So, even if I did read it with the intention of relaying the messages to you guys, I don't know if I'd even be capable of doing so. It's been kept in Sweden's National Library and has been there for several hundred years if you guys wanted to go and give it a read. I don't recommend it. Number 5 on this list is Weirdo. This one's a bit weird. Michelle Clark Miller says, "Not me, but my uncle's best friend actually went to hell. My uncle was a Vietnam vet and was still close with some members of his platoon. One of them, nicknamed Weirdo, had the usual problems with most traumatized vets. He drank, he did drugs, he beat on people. He'd been in and out of jail, in and out of rehab. Then one day he had a heart attack and died on the table. He said he woke up in a dark place full of volcanoes, swamps. He said it smelled awful and all you could hear was people screaming. He said he was full of fear, dread, and despair, but when he turned around to run, all he saw was fire, lava, smoke, and tar. Then he heard a man's voice say, 'You have one more chance, Jonathan.' That was his real name. Next thing he knew, he was in a hospital room surrounded by his wife, his Vietnam buddies, and their families. And yeah, he turned his life around. Yeah, I think my life would be 100% different if I straight up went to hell, saw the devil there, saw how bad hell actually was, and then had him tell me that if I don't figure it out, I'm basically gonna be here for all eternity. No. Yeah, that would straight up traumatize me forever, guys. I think what's kind of crazy about this, though, is that he got a second chance. Like, you think about the devil, and you don't really think about the devil giving out a whole lot of second chances. Maybe he was just in a good mood or something. I don't know what it was, but hopefully Weirdo got the memo and doesn't need to go back there anytime soon. Number 4 on this list is Your Deepest Desire. This is a story from a Quora user named JP. Somebody asked them if they had ever spoken to the devil, and they replied, "I believe so. I woke up one morning facing the wall of my bedroom. Bed was pushed up against the wall. Rolled over the other direction, and there standing in front of me was a guy just standing there, wearing a suit, very typical of a well-dressed businessman. I was going through a rough time, personal stuff. He says one thing to me, 'I can give you what you want.' All while this is going on, I felt no worries or fear. It seemed oddly normal. My answer was, and still is, no. I did know what he was offering. I wanted it, but not for free. I had no belief one way or another about God at the time. I wouldn't say I didn't believe, I just never put much thought into religion. I can now say without a doubt God exists. Not because I've seen him or met him, but because I've met his enemy. My life has never been the same. I feel now without any choice of my own. I live with one foot in the spirit and one foot in the real world. Wish I could go back to being ignorant. And for that reason alone, I am happy to have never faced the devil head on like JP has. All innocence is gone from you after you see and hear something like that. Now you know that everything you do, you are being watched by the devil and also by God too. Pretty scary thing to wake up to there. Number 3 on this list is the purple golf cart. So I told this story in another video we did talking about the devil, but I have to tell it again considering how terrifying it actually is. Jeremy is a 31-year-old man who just over a decade ago lost his father. On that day, the one of the death though, he received a crazy message, one that haunts him to this day. It was early in the morning and Jeremy was on his way to work. His phone rang, he didn't know the number. Jeremy picked it up, he said hello. No response, the line was flat. He could tell that someone was on the other end, but they didn't say anything back. He said hello again. Nothing. He thinks, okay, butt dial, and is about to hang up when a muffled voice comes up. The voice sounded identical to his father's. His father's voice was soft and there was something wrong. It almost felt as if his father was being forced to speak. He told Jeremy to beware of the purple golf cart and that if he saw it, it meant that he was going straight to hell. Before Jeremy could ask any questions, a loud maniacal laugh was heard over the receiver and the phone hung up. He was rightfully freaked out at this point, so he quickly dialed up to his dad. No answer. Then he called his mother. She picked up and he heard sobbing. She told him that she was just about to call him and that his father had just died. He was out on the golf course driving around a purple golf cart and the cart's brakes stopped working. He accidentally drove straight off of a cliff. From that day forward, Jeremy is a full believer in the devil and in hell. He's told his story many times and thinks that when he received that unknown phone call, it was actually his dad calling him from hell. The devil was forcing him to call his son, and that maniacal laugh at the end of the call was the devil himself loving the brutality of it all. Jeremy hasn't come within a golf course ever since that call and refuses to. Golf carts, or frankly anything golf related, is strictly off limits for him. If he touches or even sees a purple golf cart, that could be the end. And honestly, I know being scared of a purple golf cart sounds kind of ridiculous, but if I got that phone call, then I'd be feeling the exact same way. Number 2 on this list is I can't wait. I can't wait. Those are the words that Sabrina heard back in 2011 when she had a face-to-face encounter with the devil. She was snorkeling out in Australia at the time. She was a regular and knew her way around the reef. This time though, she made an almost fatal mistake. She was stung by a creature that did not want to be disturbed. Her whole body froze up and it went into shock. Her one friend, who was snorkeling with her, noticed after a few minutes and dragged her to shore. At this point though, she had taken in so much water and the sting was really bad. She was fading very fast. While her friend called the ambulance and tried to get help, Sabrina was in her own world entirely. That world was hell. Sabrina traveled to hell and was standing on top of a mountain looking down at the flames and death below. People strung up getting abused by demons of all shapes and sizes. The torture was horrible and the screams were even worse. Shadow creatures flew and circled around the skies and clouds shot down lightning that was actually fire. It was truly hell being there. Then the entire world started to shift and a giant creature that Sabrina could only imagine was the devil took shape in the sky. It smiled and cackled and looked straight at her. Then it said, "I can't wait to meet you, Sabrina. See you very soon." And just like that, her eyes opened and she saw a paramedic reviving her on the beach. She had died for a little bit there and went to hell, and the devil himself stopped in to tell her how excited he was to meet her. Since then, Sabrina has quit snorkeling completely, probably for the best after an experience like that. And finally, number 1 on this list is the end. The devil has a lot of powers. We probably don't even know what they all are, to be honest, considering most people who deal with the devil don't last long enough to tell us about them. Either way, he is clearly a very powerful creature, and knowing when the world will end, that could be one of his capabilities. Well, apparently Bill Madigan had a run-in with him, and he told him just that. Bill was walking around the Black Forest in Germany, a haunted forest that we've actually talked a lot about on this channel before. He was hiking around when he saw some bright red glowing in the distance. He approached it and realized something was very wrong. He decided that he wanted to turn around and got a bad feeling, but his body actually wouldn't let him. His feet just kept walking in the direction of the light even though he wanted to stop. Finally, he got to the source of the light and he saw what he can only believe to be the devil performing some very sick and sadistic rituals that I can't even get into deep detail about because it's that bad. The devil looked at Bill right in his eyes and told him that he could take his life now, but instead of doing that, he wanted Bill to see his grand finale. He also told Bill that he wouldn't have to wait very long, only 2 decades from now his grand finale would be revealed. This happened back in 2016, so if we do the math, that would mean that the world might end in 2036. That doesn't leave us a whole lot of time, folks. Number 5 on this list is the Panama 7. The following story happened only a few years ago and is a horrifying tale where 7 people in Panama were found dead from a terrifying ritual. The BBC writes 10 people have been arrested on suspicion of murder. The suspects and all victims were thought to belong to the Nagobi indigenous community. The grave was discovered after 3 villagers escaped and made their way to a local hospital last weekend, prosecutor Rafael Baloy said. They then alerted authorities about several families being held by an indigenous-run sect. On Wednesday, police raided the community located in a jungle region in northwest Panama, some 250 kilometers from the capital Panama City. They were performing a ritual inside the structure. In that ritual, there were people being held against their will, being mistreated, said Mr. Balois. All of these rites were aimed at killing them if they didn't repent their sins. Inside the makeshift church, officers found a naked woman, machetes, knives, and a ritually sacrificed goat, Mr. Balois said. The site was controlled by a religious sect called the New Light of God, believed to have been operating in the region for about 3 months. According to Mr. Balois, the kidnapping and torture started last Saturday after one of the members claimed to have received a message from God. The victims were then kidnapped from their homes, beaten, and killed. So let me ask you guys, does that sound like something that God would tell you to do? Gather up a bunch of people, hold them against their will, and torture and kill them? To me, if any sort of entity was to tell you to do something like that, then that would be a demon or maybe the devil. Maybe that demonic entity would portray themselves as God or someone else, but I don't know what type of God would do something like this. To be completely honest, folks, I'm really not a religious person, so when I hear something like this, I believe that this was the work of people who were extremely sick or misguided. But I can guarantee to them, they probably really felt like they were acting as the vessel for some higher being. I think in this instance though, they really did misjudge who that higher being was. This happened literally back in 2020 as well, guys, so really not that long ago. My heart truly does go out to the people that were killed and to the families of those who were taken way too soon. Number 4 on this list is The Devil Made Me Do It. This famous Ed and Lorraine case may be the best example of when someone tried to claim a demonic possession led to a crime. The case is centered around a young man named Orrin Cheyenne Johnson and the man that he murdered, a 40-year-old named Alan Bono. Mental Floss says there was no question that Johnson killed Bono. However, his defense attorney, 33-year-old Martin Minella, planned to argue that the 19-year-old was not guilty by virtue of demonic possession. Ahead of the trial, Minella pled his case through the media, giving interviews to major press outlets. The courts have dealt with the existence of God, and now they'll be asked to deal with the existence of the demonic spirit, Minella told People. The day after Johnson was arrested, Lorraine Warren called the Brookfield police and blamed the killing on a demon. Johnson didn't actually say the devil made him do it, he only claimed that he didn't remember stabbing Bono. However, according to to the testimony of an officer on the scene, Johnson did tell the police, "I think I hurt someone." Now, this defense didn't actually work out for Johnson. He was inevitably convicted of first-degree manslaughter and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. However, he didn't serve nearly that many and was released after less than 5 years for being a really good prisoner. In my opinion, I kind of doubt that this guy was actually under the influence of a demonic possession, and clearly the jury, they felt the same way. That being said though, he did seem pretty committed to that story during the trial, so I suppose it's something to consider. Number 3 on this list is Manuel Vela. Several years ago, Manuel Vela killed his pregnant girlfriend. It was a brutal murder and an incident which climaxed in a police chase where he was finally captured. Many people obviously asked the question, why? And the answer may shock you. The Mystique says Vela told the interviewers that the murder of his girlfriend and her child were part of a religious and political statement. He was possibly trying to enlighten the crowd of his opinion on pro-life ideologies. However, it seemed like his motivation behind the murders wasn't just politically backed. He went on to say how he is the Antichrist and the voices in his head guided him on what to do. Many of his analogies were akin to things that have happened in the history of Christianity. Vela literally believed that he was the Antichrist, guys. That sounds like a pretty textbook example of a demonic possession to me. At this point, Vela's competency to stand trial was in question and a hearing needed to be done. Manuel never actually made it to the hearing though, because in January 2017, authorities found him dead in his cell. He had taken his own life. Number 2 on this list is the Son of Sam. The Son of Sam was a killer that caused one of the biggest citywide police investigations ever. Ranker says New York City during the summer of 1976 was a hotbed of anger, frustration, and fear, and David Burwitz, aka the Son of Sam, didn't help the matter by killing 6 people and wounding 7 others in the span of 1 year. After his arrest, Burwitz told police that he was under the control of a demon named Harvey who inhabited his neighbor's dog and implored him to kill people. Once, during a 3-month break from his murder spree, Burwitz wrote the New York Post to say, "I am still here like a spirit roaming the night, thirsty, hungry, seldom stopping to rest." After being incarcerated, Burwitz received a sentence of 365 years in prison, by the way. He became a born-again Christian, but he still believes that the devil and God are fighting for possession of his soul. No wonder this guy got 365 years. Not only did he kill 6 people, but to write to the Times saying that he's still thirsty and hungry, yeah, this is clearly a man that needs to be kept behind bars for literally ever. Once again, I want to stress the fact here that I'm not a religious man personally. When I hear a story like this, I believe that it's far more likely that the Son of Sam was just truly mentally unstable and probably in need of some very serious help. He truly believed though that a demon had called upon him and was using his body as a vessel for evil. We may never know what truly caused him to do this, but at least he's locked up for good and won't be doing it again anytime soon. And finally, number 1 on this list is Michael Taylor. Several decades ago, Taylor was apparently possessed by a horrible demon, and this time it really got the better of him. Ranker says in 1974, Michael Taylor was just a simple butcher living in Ossett, England, who was suddenly overcome by an evil spirit. He had an exorcism performed on October 5th and 6th of 1974, and while it went okay, the priests weren't able to expel all of the demons. According to Bill Ellis, an authority on folklore and the occult in contemporary culture, in an all-night ceremony, the exorcists believed that they had invoked and cast out at least 40 demons, including those of incest, bestiality, blasphemy, and lewdness. At the end, exhausted, they allowed Taylor to go home, although they felt that at least 3 demons, insanity, murder, and violence, were still left in him. So, you know, kind of the big 3. After he returned home, Taylor immediately murdered his wife by ripping out her eyes and tongue and then tearing off most of the skin from her face, finally strangling their pet poodle. Police found Taylor standing in the street naked and covered in blood, shouting, "It is the blood of Satan." This is truly one of the most graphic crimes I've ever read about, honestly. Like, to think that this happened in real life is extremely scary. Also, if he was possessed by some type of demon, like, what demon was this and how do we all avoid this? I feel like this is pretty pertinent information considering what Taylor ended up doing. Number 5 on this list is the stone pressing. Let's take a second and think of the worst ways to die. Just a little thought experiment. Drowning, that would suck for sure. Apparently that is one of the worst pains you'll ever feel. Being burned alive, that would be really freaking bad. Nothing seems to hurt more than a bad burn. I think, getting eaten alive, like that, just full on getting mauled by something, that would suck. I can't imagine that would feel very good. But you know what you probably didn't think of there is getting squished. And to specifically qualify that, getting squished slowly. The reason that didn't come to mind is because no one really thinks about that as a way to go, but now that we are thinking about it, I think that ranks pretty high on my list of horrible ways to die. Getting squished slowly is exactly what happened to a poor man in the Salem witch trials. Ranker says 19 people were executed during the Salem witch trials in early 1691, most of whom were hanged. Giles Corey, however, received a different sentence. During his trial, his torturers tried to make him admit to practicing black magic and being devoted to the devil. They did this by piling rocks on his chest one by one while demanding he confess. All his neighbors watched as he was crushed in a pit, only willing to say, "More weight," rather than confess to something that he had not done. These proved to be his final words before he was pressed to death and was buried in an unmarked grave. Imagine just walking out your door one day, minding your own business, then getting taken away by the authorities, accused of something that you probably have absolutely no knowledge of, and then found guilty of that said thing. Then, as your punishment for that crime that you didn't do, you get taken to the public square and all of your neighbors and friends come out to watch as you get rocks slowly piled onto your body, eventually resulting in all of your bones to break and your internal organs to burst. Yeah, this really sucked for my dude Giles. The Salem witch trials, in my opinion, are one of the most messed up times in history. Like, that entire scenario is just one freaking mess, people losing their minds over something that they don't understand. And poor Giles got crushed for it, and now we can all remember on his tombstone. Number 4 on this list is specimens. Whenever I hear the word specimen, I get a pretty distinct image of science and laboratories, test subjects. I think of movie scenes where there are vials of weird substances and really smart people doing some really questionable forward-thinking stuff. What I really don't want to be thinking about though is dead bodies. That's pretty much what we have here though. Creepy says, Ohio Asylum is known for its creepy and thrilling gravestones. However, 2 of those gravestones are amongst the most horrific ones. These tombstones read the word specimens only, with no other details like date or name. What freaks people out is the imagination of what the word specimens could possibly be referring to. What are these specimens of? Many theories have been made. Specimens of body parts of the deceased or bodies of on whom the untested medications were tested. We always knew that the old asylums were bad news, but this is taking it to another level. Like old asylums back in the day would run some very questionable experiments against people's wills and do things that they never should have done. This was also absolutely ridiculous because the whole point of these places should have been to help people who are dealing with mental issues. Even after all of this though, I never would have thought that it would have gotten to this. To be sent to this place, and then later, after having had multiple experiments done on you that your body probably didn't respond well to then be reduced to a small box buried outside that reads specimens on it. To not even have a name anymore, but just to be considered a failed science experiment. This is some super sick and twisted stuff right here, guys, and it's part of the reason why asylums were feared for so long. Number 3 on this list is the baby monster. This one is not only scary, but it's also really sad. If a gravestone has the word monster on it to describe what is underneath said gravestone, then one gets a pretty scary and creepy image. This is not the full truth though when it comes to what happened with this gravestone. Creepy says this tombstone was inscribed in a time when the word monster was often used to describe a person with serious deformities in any form. Considering that, and also the short span of time for which the baby lived, it can be theorized that the baby was severely deformed and could not live for very long. The death of said individual is not certain, and it's intriguing to know that no real name was given to this baby. When this child would have been buried, you have to imagine that it would have been in an era where whatever deformities it did have wouldn't have been understood. People may have suspected the devil or some demonic presence to have caused what happened here. The sad truth is that this was a kid just like anyone else who just kinda got a little bit unlucky at birth. Back in this day, that sort of unluckiness though wouldn't have been accepted or tolerated. So in this case, we're just left with a really creepy gravestone that should make us all very thankful that we were born in this era and not back then when this sort of stuff would happen. Number 2 on this list is the Unforgiving Society. This next one should make you very happy that you live in the time period that you do now, but also make you think a lot about some of the recent political shifts going on in the United States. Creepy says this tombstone is of a girl who died a sad death. She passed away in very unfortunate circumstances. She was impregnated before marriage, after which she struggled to get an abortion for her parents' honor. When making her tombstone, the creators could not help but feel guilt for her story. The words on the tombstone describe how unfair and unforgiving the cruel society had been to her. Now the tombstone actually reads, Kate McCormick, seduced and pregnant by her father's friend. Unwed, she died from abortion, her only choice. Abandoned in life and death by family, with but a single rose from her mother. Buried only through the kindness of unknown benefactors. Died February 1875, age 21. Victim of an unforgiving society, have mercy on us. Now the first thing that I thought of when I read this was the laws that are being stripped right now in the United States. This is a very polarizing issue where strong opinions are had on all sides, but this tombstone, in my opinion, is a clear example of what can happen when that right is stripped away from women. Kate didn't deserve the fate that she got, and maybe the scariest part about all of this is that this storyline, the one that we saw right here, I mean, a similar one could still happen today. And finally, number 1 on this list is Mary C. Donlenchi. Mary C. really wasn't too fond of the people who put her where she is now. In fact, she hated them so much that she put a curse on them, one that might still be running rampant throughout their bloodlines to this day. Her tombstone read, "May eternal damnation be upon those in Wailing Part who, without knowing me, have maliciously vilified me. May the curse of God be upon them and theirs." Now, the crazy part about all this though is that apparently her neighbors and the people that she's cursing, they didn't do anything wrong to her. Creepy says, as shown by the words on the tombstone, Mary C. felt nothing but anger towards her neighbors. The delusions she had of her neighbors conspiring against her are depicted on this tombstone. She left all of her possessions to the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals after her death in 1985. The neighbors reported how the deceased used to constantly indulge in petty fights and negative behaviors. So apparently this curse was just her being super petty. Imagine you only have a few more words on planet Earth, and instead of like telling your family you love them and stuff, you decide to curse your neighbors who literally did nothing wrong to you. This curse hasn't been super effective though, which is a good thing. Apparently some of the members of the cursed family have noticed something every now and again, but nothing too major that should make anybody freak out. Still though, really hoping that I don't become my neighbor's punching bag and get cursed from beyond the grave for literally nothing.